Welcome on into the Utah Blockcast. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah Insider for KSL Sports. That's Josh Bennett. Bennett, man, I hope your Christmas was a good one. I hope it was great. I hope you enjoyed time with the family. I hope you just were able to relax, put the phone down for a while, because, man, it did not take any time to get back on the roller coaster ride that is a Utah football offseason. How you doing, brother?
Good. Good Christmas. Didn't feel like Christmas, like literally feel like Christmas, like 50 something degrees. Like it's like raining on and off like the last, it feels like we're in like the Pacific Northwest or something. I don't know. Any which way. Feeling good. Was hoping to get a few more days of just like, let's chill a little bit and then maybe let things get crazy starting next week, and crazy going into Vegas, whatever. Now it's no, we're going to be talking about this all weekend, and I'll be at Jackson Hole tonight and tomorrow, just a quick little overnight trip, but no rest for the wicked, huh?
No rest for the wicked, man. It's I woke up this morning at 5 a.m. I was motivated. I was ready to get going on my New Year's resolutions, trying to get back into the gym and, on my fitness, right? I've put on some LBs and I've been feeling kind of icky all month long. So I was excited to get to the gym. I woke up 5 a.m. and what do I see but a Pete Thamel tweet early on in the morning. I don't even know the timestamp, but I was at the gym. I hadn't even gotten into the gym when he tweeted it, that Kyle Whittingham had emerged as the leading candidate for the Michigan head coaching job. And boy, oh boy, it's been quite the ride since 6 a.m. this morning. Since that news broke, it's been texts, calls, it's been nonstop. And so obviously it is, we've known it's the end of an era here at Utah for Kyle Whittingham. Whittingham has been at the helm for over 2 decades. He stepped down from his role and has now emerged as the top candidate for the Michigan job. And now, as reporting has indicated over the last hour or so from, people like Dan Wetzel, Pete Thamel, Nicole Auerbach, that Michigan is closing in. The deal is expected to be finalized today, if not very soon, this afternoon. And I would anticipate that not only Kyle Whittingham, but others, I would anticipate the majority of his staff will be, they'll have at least a good idea of what that staff is going to look like. So, Bennett, waking up this morning, initial reaction to the news and sort of the news that has followed this morning.
Yeah, no, I got a little bit of a sleep in, and it wasn't the first thing I did was look at my phone in the morning. I was with the kids a little bit, so then all of a sudden I start seeing Kyle Whittingham this, Kyle Whittingham that. I see a good grip of texts and DMs, and I'm just like, oh, and then start to see, okay, that's what kind of day we're gonna have today. And you knew there was a chance that this was gonna happen. You looked at when you go back to when Dave Portnoy made his shopping list, you saw a list of names, and Whittingham wasn't officially retired yet. So, or out, where I say he wasn't officially retired because that's the announcement you're waiting for. Whittingham wasn't out at Utah at that point in time. So, but you could make the joke, at that point, what about Whittingham? Because you get some of those rumblings that he might not be done, might want to keep going. Yeah. And here he is. He wants to keep going, and he doesn't want to take any time off, doesn't want to skip a beat. And so seeing that, it's this is very, very Whittingham. Yesterday we had Christmas, and today it's back to business. And the first item of business is, if you're in Kyle's shoes, first item of business, what am I going to do in 2026? And you got the Michigan job, and I think it makes a lot of sense for both parties. So this is it's a match made in heaven for both teams in a lot of different ways. So we'll get more into that, but it kind of, I guess it's the same thing. I feel the same way to land this plane. I feel the same way reacting to this news as I did when Whittingham, the announcement came that he was no longer at Utah. It's okay, that's finally official. this feels like, okay, that's finally official. Like even through the Dillingham stuff, like it felt like Whittingham was kind of like that guy. And, even though he didn't look like that guy, it doesn't surprise to see this be the job. It's a home run
Yeah.
hire for Michigan.
Yeah, I agree. I think, this may not have the ceiling of, a typical home run hire, but this certainly, secures their floor and provides them a stabilizing force that'll allow them to continue to compete at a very high level in the Big Ten. Obviously, they're going to have an edge up on USC now in the Big Ten with Kyle Whittingham,
Yeah.
headed to Ann Arbor. For Michigan, this makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. Michigan has been a program, a university, an athletic department that has just been dealing with issue after issue, and Michigan needed somebody like Whittingham to come in and clean things up. So from Michigan's perspective, I think this is as good a hire as you could hope for, considering how they ended up in the coaching carousel this time around, right? They weren't one to fire Sharon Moore at the beginning, early on in the season to kind of these big programs, they want to be at the front of the line, right? They want to be an LSU, they want to be a Florida that gets their pick of the litter. And Michigan wasn't able to do that because of the situation and how it all unfolded. We won't dive into the Sharon Moore, side of things because we don't need to. He was fired at a time that put Michigan behind the eight ball. There weren't a lot of top candidates like Elaine Kiffin available. All of a sudden, Kyle Whittingham becomes available, and he seemed like an ideal candidate for that situation. So, from Michigan's perspective, this is tremendous. For Utah, man, this is tough. You did not anticipate a Michigan job opening it up. Kyle joked that he was entering the portal and was going to listen to calls as they came. And obviously, when Michigan comes calling, that's a call you absolutely have to answer. And here we are now with him closing in on a deal to become the next head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. So with that in mind, I think Kyle Whittingham himself, that's one topic, right? And we can return to the conversation around his legacy with Utah and all that later on in this episode, later on in time with Utah. I'd be curious the ripple effect here. Let's go there. We've got a few different things that we can hit on, Bennett, but the ripple effect. We've seen it reported now. Jason Beck is the leading candidate as his offensive coordinator to join him at Michigan. That's going to be tough. And then, though not reported, according to multiple sources from both our side here, the Utah side, I've reached out to people with On3 at the Michigan side. They've confirmed as well. Jim Harding, Jay Hill at the top of the list for Kyle Whittingham to join him in Ann Arbor. And that list might continue to grow. There have been other rumblings of other coaches from Utah and BYU, but nothing confirmed yet on both ends. Just those three names, Beck, Harding, and Jay Hill. What do we think of the potential impact ripple effect of those three coaches following Kyle to Ann Arbor?
Yeah, let's kind of start with Beck, right? Offensive coordinator comes into Utah, instantly turns the, let's call it the worst offense in the country into the best offense in the country. And you're not being too exaggerative by saying as much. So Beck, obviously a huge factor in what helped Kyle Whittingham turn this ship around and go from that losing season to a 10-win season with a bowl game with a chance at 11, right? So huge there. And then the continuity piece and Jim Harding. Jim Harding has been with Utah for a really long time now and has seen a lot of guys come in and become developed and find themselves find their way into the NFL, and you're starting to see that become fruitful in terms of 5-star recruits. Kelvin Obot coming in because of a guy like Jim Harding, and then so then you look at, Jay Hill, the ripple effects of this that doesn't just impact Utah, right? So obviously, losing that offensive side of the ball for Utah, huge killer, right? Always a question mark. And we'll talk more into that. Is the that could be a good thing for Scalley, right? To get a guy that's his guy and things. I don't think anybody was complaining about having Beck in there and be having some continuity from one of the best offenses in the country. But Scalley, it does give him an opportunity to pick his guy. But we'll get into that later on. But obviously, that'll totally shake up the whole entire makeup of the Utah offensive side of the football. And then, the ripple effects. Kyle Whittingham, talk about the state of Utah. BYU has a defensive coordinator who has, according to a lot of people, really whipped BYU into shape and got BYU really on track. A lot of credit to where BYU is today goes to Jay Hill. A lot of people look at Jay as the operator there in Provo that, that's a guy that leaves, that's going to hurt BYU as well. So it's a massive ripple effect. If Jay Hill goes, if Jason Beck goes, if Jim Harding goes, the ripple effect goes from not just coaches, but what about players and recruits, and the ripple effect, dwindles down from there.
Right. And I think when we're talking about players and the ripple effect, of Beck, Harding, and Hill, I think there are a few guys to keep in mind here. Obviously with the relationship that Dampier has with Beck, he is going to be a name that he's going to be somebody that I think will voice his desire to stay with Beck. I think he'll want to follow Beck to Michigan. Now, the thing there is Michigan has a really promising young star in Bryce Underwood that Michigan boosters are 1,000% committed to keeping in Ann Arbor. So that's kind of an X factor here. With Harding, I think Harding has done a tremendous job of building a strong culture in that offensive line room. Isaac Asiata has been instrumental in that as well. Kelvin Obot committed to Utah largely due to Harding, what the offensive line has done over the years, the blueprint that he's provided with I'm each notification that pops up on my phone. I keep looking over because I don't know what's coming next, man. It's been that kind of morning. But Kelvin Obot, right? Harding, Utah provide the blueprint of, you come to Utah, you're instant day one starter. We're going to help you develop. We're going to turn you into a first round draft pick. If Harding goes, that potentially means that Obot follows him. It also it doesn't necessarily guarantee that, but I think there is a culture here and still a route for Obot to come into Utah and still compete right away. And Utah can also make some hires that can affect some things as well. But that's certainly one player to keep in mind there. With Jay Hill, the safety Faletau Satuala is going to be the headliner of this whole thing. If Jay Hill goes to Michigan, I would 1,000% anticipate Satuala following Hill to Michigan, as that was a key relationship in this whole recruitment of Satuala a couple years ago. So that's sort of the initial ripple effect of those assistant coaches potentially following Whittingham to Michigan. There could be additional ripple effects of other players that could follow Whittingham. But as it stands right now, those are the players to keep in mind with all of this. Obviously, going back to Kelvin Obot, Michigan was one of the top contenders in his recruitment. Before he committed to Utah, it was Nebraska, Oregon, Utah, and Michigan. So this is going to be something to keep in mind. I think there's certainly a route for Utah to hang on to Dampier, to hang on to Obot as well. But I think it's going to be really tough regardless. So with that in mind, did Utah do the I'm going to ask you a difficult question here, Bennett. Did Utah, Mark Harlan, the decision makers, the boosters, whoever it was, we know that Whittingham wasn't necessarily forced out, but he also wasn't necessarily recruited to, or wanted back for multiple seasons. We'll say that. Was that the right call?
You don't ask the easy questions, do you? This question's above my pay grade, but
Yes.
I'm gonna answer this question. No, I don't think Utah messed this up. I don't think yeah, almost nothing in life is ever perfect, right? And you wish it could be perfect. And the things that you pick up and hear behind the scenes, you hear about potential story book endings and Abbey Roads and things like that, and then you get what's starting to look like a disaster. Like, so no, nothing was perfect, but you knew that some of this was possible, and it's refused to call anything a force out. I think the way, depending who you ask and things like that, it's like there's different stories, different things, and whatnot. Everybody has their own side of the story. I don't think force out is a fair word to use, but what Utah did was it prioritized its future and ultimately stood on the decision that Utah football, the University of Utah, is bigger than any one person, and that can't be taken as disrespect to Kyle Whittingham. That needs to be something that he needs to understand. That, and if he can't, then that's a different problem for a different um, day. But it's overall, I don't think Utah messed this up by prioritizing the future with Morgan Scalley. Now that does put a ton of pressure on Morgan, that he's going to need to win, and he's going to need to win right away. And he needs to have the backing of the boosters and of the administration and of the players and of the fans. Really, the fans, the stuff that's said on social media, it gets through. And Scally does. He spends a little bit of time on Twitter or X. Spends a little bit of time on there too. So like, just the fans having that fan support, having the support of everybody. You look at like this private equity deal, and Utah has themselves in a position to get ahead. Use that to get ahead, and another one of those tangents that we can go down. But ultimately, I don't think that Utah mess this up if Scally is who everybody thinks Scally can be. It's just a little bit of turbulence, so buckle up for a little bit. It ended up being just fine last year. This time of year, everything was awful and the sky is falling, blah, blah, blah. Utah put it together, got a 10-win season and turned it around just fine. So we'll see.
Okay, I'm going to call it now. I'm going to say Jason Beck and Jay Hill will be Kyle Whittingham's coordinators at Michigan. That comes from a pretty good source. So I'm going to make a prediction that those guys are that's what it's going to be. I feel pretty good about that with the text that just came in. All right. So, sorry, were you going to say something, Bennett?
What do I say after that? As you break
Yes.
news in the middle of an episode, so let's just
Yeah. Not necessarily news, but just making a prediction, a bold prediction. And it's not even that bold because these guys have been the guys that we've assumed would follow Whittingham to Michigan whenever this became a thing. I'm gonna take a swing at that question I threw your way because it was a doozy. Obviously, in a situation like this, there are a lot of different angles, a lot of different feelings, and a lot of different things that play into what has happened at Utah this month, right? And this includes big picture conversation. Kyle Whittingham saying he didn't want to coach till he was 65, he didn't want to coach beyond 65. He didn't want to be a lifer. The year to year, back and forth. Is he retiring? Is he coming back? Scally being given the head coach in waiting tag by Kyle Whittingham. Kyle picking his successor. And then, when that title was stripped from him, Kyle Whittingham was pounding the table for it to be given back to him, because he knew he was the right guy for Utah. We get to this point now, and it seems like Utah has it set up perfectly for Scalley to take over. I think the transition at this point in time is the right call. I agree completely. I believe this is the right time to, and I shouldn't say right time. I believe this is the decision that I think makes a lot of sense for Utah, is to make the transition from Kyle to Morgan. Now the timing, I think the timing, Utah could have benefited tremendously from this playing out in the month of January and February rather than the month of December. I think this is something that could have benefited Utah. There was no rush. There was no need to have something figured out. The only reason something needed to be figured out was the potential loss of Morgan Scalley. And that's kind of the big driver in all of this, is there was a real chance that Morgan Scalley could have left Utah for another job, potentially a head coaching job, potentially another power conference defensive coordinator position. Scalley had a lot of interest, and I think Utah, as you mentioned, Bennett, Utah prioritized the future. They did not want to lose Morgan Scalley, but I think there could have been something done to move these conversations back a month after the bowl game. To give these coaches time to breathe, to allow Kyle Whittingham to sit on his couch, spread eagle, clothed, not clothed, and really think about his future. I think the fact that this was rushed as it was this month, and this is hindsight being 2020 now, because in the moment it felt like all of this as it was happening was the right time. But I think now that things have happened, hindsight being 2020, I think Utah could have benefited from this all playing out in the month of January. But that is, I feel like that's the only thing that Utah could have done differently to make this situation not what this is, right? Not, and so that's really it. I think that's the only difference. That's the only thing that would have made a difference for Utah in this situation.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point actually that I hadn't even thought of, is the timing. If Utah could have just worked on the timing a little bit, a lot. Yeah, great point. It would
Yeah.
have just worked with the transfer portal, the way college football works, the roster build out works, and all of that. It could have been a little less tricky.
And again, that gets back to Morgan Scalley and the pressure Utah felt in keeping him at Utah, because he did have interest from other programs. This last year, this year, this month, he had significant interest from programs. And so I think part of the reason it played out this month the way that it did is directly because of that.
Yeah, you got to wonder if a little bit of that hand was, I don't want to say forced, but pushed along. Morgan needing to know what his future is, because he's been waiting on his future for so long, so rightfully so. He has that. He's earned at least knowing what does my tomorrow look like, and what am I in control of, so I can control it.
Yeah, and
So
obviously,
for that.
yeah, and obviously for Morgan, right? It's been a couple years where it's kind of been back and forth. Kyle seems like he's headed out the door, and then he's all of a sudden he's back. And so for him, you kind of understand. I don't want to say the lack of patience, but I wonder, had Utah had greater foresight of what was going on, if they could have massaged this to move it back a month, right? Say Morgan, give us a month. Allow Kyle to take some time and really think this through. I wonder if that could have been something Harlan and the people in power could have done to massage this out a little bit. But again, that is, I think, the only thing that could have made a difference here is just the timing of it all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And honestly, I respect Morgan for having the backbone to stand his ground and do what he wants. I wouldn't want anything else than a guy that's going to be your head coach.
No, 100%. And so I think you made the point earlier that this is time for Utah to step up and back Morgan Scalley. Obviously, Kyle Whittingham is going to have the full support of Michigan and their donors, and that is a donor base that is significant to say the least, you know. And so it's time for Utah to really get behind their Utah man at the helm with Scally and show him the support he's going to need to get things done. I think with Beck and Harding looking like they're off to Ann Arbor, Scally is going to have to make a couple hires early on to put his stamp on the program, right away. And it's going to be up to the boosters to provide him with the resources that he'll need to get the right guys in place. And I think there is a lot of support for Scally to get that done. And so we'll see. Now, in terms of what this means for the immediate future, obviously Utah has a bowl game December 31st, New Year's Eve. I do not anticipate Kyle Whittingham coaching that game. I think this is going to be the first game Morgan Scalley puts on that head coaching headset and takes control of this Utah program. I think that's what we're going to see is Morgan Scalley, operating as head coach for that game. And so, if Kyle is not going to be around coaching, even with the hires, I would anticipate probably Beck calling plays for Morgan one last time. And we see what happens there. But I do not anticipate Whittingham being on the sidelines in Las Vegas. I think he's actually going to be in Orlando with the Michigan squad as they get ready to take on Texas in that bowl game December 31st.
Yeah, it's just an interesting dynamic. The Vegas Bowl, it went from being Kyle's last game as a coach for the University of Utah to Morgan's first game as a coach for the University of Utah. So just a crazy how fast things happen. You sit there and you're wondering what's that last game going to look like with Kyle Whittingham? Well, you saw it happen in Lawrence the morning after Thanksgiving. So if you were hoping to see Kyle Whittingham one last time on the Utah Ute sidelines, you got it at the Kansas State game. So in comes Morgan, and the same way that Kyle's going to get the blue carpet rolled out for him in Ann Arbor, Utah needs to absolutely have the back of Morgan Scalley and make sure he has everything he needs to succeed from day one, because this is going to potentially get a little bit hairy, and there's going to be some pieces that are plucked and things that aren't going to look the same as they did when Morgan not officially took over, but when that unofficial, I guess, passing of the torch happened. This roster's not going to look, the staff's not going to look exactly as it did. So Utah has the resources to go out and refill those cupboards. It's going to be important in year one to start Scalley off with everything he needs to succeed.
No, absolutely. So I think that's going to be a big thing. And I think keeping the headline pieces in place, I think, has got to be a top priority. But unfortunately, just with the questions surrounding the staff, until Morgan Scalley gets pieces in place, staff in place, I think it's going to leave some questions for players currently on the roster, for players coming into the program, that could potentially lead to to some departures. We already mentioned, Devin Dampier, Kelvin Obot as guys that could potentially leave. There are other players that I think are pretty safe here. There's been a lot of questions about Celeste Moa potentially following Whittingham to Michigan. I do not anticipate that being a thing. I think resources really help Utah here with NIL, and the same goes for Obot. I think that's another factor here is Utah paying Obot a pretty significant amount of money to keep him in place. But I think it just opens the question of, who else could potentially leave the program, in terms of players. I don't anticipate there being, a significant amount of departures on the defensive side of the ball, but offensively, there could be some impact there. There could be some changes. So we will see. But man, a lot to play out, a lot to shake out. We're waiting the official announcement of the Kyle Whittingham hire at Michigan. We're again, I'm getting texts and stuff as we're going, so I apologize. All right, dude. Whitt's legacy. How does this impact Whitt's legacy with Utah? With him, taking coaches with him, and what that could potentially do for Utah.
Yeah,
how should fans feel about it?
Yeah, I don't think anything that he can do short of like going to be the head coach of BYU is unforgivable, right? Yeah. Like I think he can cross a lot of lines and time will heal, right? So we'll see. It's to be determined how fans should feel, but if he's taken back and he's taken Harding, can't really blame the guy. Offense, a side of the ball that he has always been tricky for Kyle, and then Jim Harding gives him one of those guys that's just always been there with him and has turned down a lot of really good opportunities to stay by Kyle's side and stay in Salt Lake. So good for Jim to go and get closer to home and follow that opportunity. But you hope that Kyle keeps it professional, and if he's able to keep it professional and not totally pillage things, and stay true to that. I left it in a pretty good place mentality when he said he was moving on. Then fans should feel all right and be able to root for him, even if in the immediate future there's a little bit of turmoil caused by his departure and his transition to a new home.
Yeah, I think it's obviously when you're talking about fans and how they should feel, it's a large conversation because there's so many different opinions, so many different feelings to consider, and people view things so many different ways. So this is not a one size fits all type of thing, but I think there's still room for plenty of appreciation. Kyle Whittingham is still the GOAT of Utah football. He still deserves his statue for what he's done for the program and the university. Obviously, with the way things have ended, we know that Kyle Whittingham is a petty dude. You can go back to Wyoming and then putting a 50 burger on Wyoming back in 08 or whenever it was. What was the coach's name there? Joe Glenn. We can go back to that. We know that Kyle is petty, and you worry about the pettiness creeping into things. And I don't think him taking coaches with him is a sign of pettiness. I just think these are the guys that Kyle Whittingham is built with. Jim Harding is originally from Ohio. He's from that area, the Midwest. Michigan, in a lot of ways, is probably a dream job of sorts for Jim Harding. This is a tremendous opportunity for him to go to Michigan. Jason Beck, there was a lot of talk about Whittingham, Scalley making the hire last year. From what I've gathered, Whitt was the driver for Jason Beck, and Beck probably feels like Whitt is the guy that got him in this situation. There's probably a relationship where Kyle feels like Beck is his guy. And so we'll see. I think things I think there's room for a lot of different feelings, but I hope that fans continue to give their respect to Whittingham and what he accomplished here at Utah. Obviously, there's going to be pain probably with some of these departures. There's going to be difficulties, but it's just kind of the nature of the business and the situation that we're in. And so Utah wanted to turn the page, and that means there's going to be consequences with that. And when you got a guy like Kyle Whittingham who still wants to coach at a high level, this is what it's going to be.
I got one closing question for you.
What do you got?
What is your advice to all journalists aspiring to cover a Kyle Whittingham led program?
Be very mindful of the words he actually says. And the things you hear about Kyle Whittingham, right? This whole situation has just been a wild one to follow. I think it's clear it always felt like retirement or continuing to coach for Whitt, and that ended up not being the case. Coach Whitt wanted to continue coaching. Utah wanted to move on, and Whitt did not decide to retire. He instead stepped down. I think words matter. I think being get ready to learn availability report lingo with Kyle Whittingham and all that. And so yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Love it.
Man, oh man.
Love
Man,
it.
oh man. Good luck out there to everybody. We'll see what happens. I got to get back to hitting the phones, but wanted to get this recorded. Bennett, thanks so much for hopping on, taking 35 minutes of your day, the day after Christmas. The grind never stops, except for the day of Christmas, obviously, but the grind never stops. Appreciate you, brother. We'll be back with more episodes if news breaks, if we need to go live, might have to do that, but go ahead. We'll wrap this one up. Appreciate you guys. And yeah.
Appreciate you guys.